You were recently quoted in an interview by an Atlanta publication as saying, "I'm 100% American. I'm a very patriotic person." There's evidence of this, as I said, throughout your body of work. I'd like you to kind of expound upon that, because we've had a lot of questions about it, and it is so germane to your visual vocabulary.
Yeah, well, I think pretty much from day one, like any boy growing up in England in the 1950s and 60s, which I did, our basic breeding ground for anything that we socially enjoyed or adhered ourselves to came from the United States, without a doubt. Whether it was something as simple as the Lone Ranger on TV or Chuck Berry on the radio, it all emanated from the United States. And I was no different than anybody else of that point in time. I mean, everything that I wanted to achieve or wanted to aspire to came from this country. And as I say, I was no different than any other of my contemporaries at the time. I think I just took it a lot further. I think that it wasn't just the music for me. It was everything. It was artistic. It was literature. It was everything that I aspired to came from here. And you have to understand also where I was raised. I think if you put it into terminology of now, it would be like somebody being raised in Harlan County, Kentucky by Dorothy Parker, you know. So I had her on my side, so she gave me the sort of dynamite, the blue touch paper. And I know that sounds like a mishmash of a lot of different things, but yeah, ultimately, I made my way here, like all my contemporaries, but at the same time, I think I had slightly more drive in my dedication to be American. Where most of my contemporaries, it was a musical process that brought them here and inspired them. For me, it was more than that. It wasn't just musical, it was theatrical in the big picture. It was very much the art form of the time that when I came to America, one of the first things that I wanted to do was investigate modern art. And at the time, all of that was taking place in New York. So because at that time also we were pretty thin in the pocket as far as having any financial support, the places that were home to me were the galleries in New York, art galleries, especially Museum of Modern Art, where I'd go and sit for hours and look at Warhol, and especially people like Anselm Kiefer, Hans Hofmann, people that really spoke to me, people that had a picturesque sense of life that you had to investigate. And for me, that's always been, I'm probably wandering off course here in your Americana question, and I can go in so many different directions on that. But that was what really drew me in, as much as music. It was looking at abstract art and looking at the stories that lay within it. And again, it all came from this country.
So let's back up and go into the musical archaeology, and then we're going to dive deeper into that, because there's so much more to this work that has been, I think, appropriately discussed. So the musical archaeology part.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand that everything I do in every facet of my life comes from pure passion. I am passionate to beyond extreme in my passion about American roots music. I had a radio show for 4 years on Sirius XM, called American Roots Music. And the thrust of the whole show, the 2-hour show, was my desire to never let American roots music be forgotten. Because that is the groundwork, it is the very core of what you hear today. I don't care how thin or immaterial you might find any form of music today that is current, it all comes from an American genre, be it Southern blues, hill country music, gospel, traditional country, urban blues. This is the absolute groundwork of the fabric that music is woven from. And I have always, as a child, I was not inspired by traditional rock and roll in the sense of, was I listening to Elvis Presley? No, I was listening to the Louvin Brothers, Ferlin Husky, Merle Haggard, these, Howlin' Wolf. I was an odd kid, I always said, when I was a kid, I was sort of a closet country fan, because back when you were a kid, you didn't say you liked Johnny Cash. That wasn't cool, that wasn't hip. And as much as I'm not saying that I disregarded, obviously the advent of the British beat boom, the Beatles, the Stones. I loved them, and they were great, but I understood where they came from. And where they came from is this, what you see around you, American music again. And so it's still what I listen to. I still listen to jazz. I'm not, I don't have my finger on the pulse of current music. There's a lot of good stuff out there right now, but you cannot forget where it came from. So the musical archaeology that you're talking about is, it came after a couple of decades of me working in other forms, in abstract form. When I started painting. Now I use no paint at all, because you are always searching for your own voice. When I started by, like you do in music, you copy other people. And it's frustrating because you ultimately want to find your own voice. You want to do something that you feel is original. You want to be a groundbreaker, but you take all of those tastemakers of the past and you make them a part of the drive that sets you on that path to find something original. And at first, I was a little afraid of putting this musical archaeology into my artwork, because I was afraid of that stigma that people had in the art world of celebrity artists, cashing in on the musical side of things. But after years of working in my studio and just creating things that I felt were a nod to my heroes, I felt that I had to go back to the ground root and do something that really significantly paid homage to the people that I did not want to be forgotten. And all of these musical pieces that you see around you are, as I say, it is, and I use the term again, musical archaeology, because I want it to be like I've gone and found these genres and dug them up and put them in front of people the way that I found them, so that they would not be forgotten.
Well, you've done it beautifully. One of the things that I commented upon to my staff earlier is that, and I said to you when you came today, this group of people here today, it was sort of, I always think everything in the world happens through divine orchestration. You have found your tribe here in this sense. This part of the country has an organic respect for materials. That is really fundamentally a Southern characteristic. We understand the application of elements that may have been the detritus of our culture, even the detritus of nature. And so when we engage this generation of your work, this iteration especially, I'm really interested in cultural archaeology, and you've done this so masterfully. I want to move into the reference to them as cultural artifacts, which is what you just said is the foundation of that. But I'm saying this to the audience as much as anything else. When we acquire works to enrich our personal lives, to add ballast to our collections, whatever your motivation for acquiring art, one of the things that one should hope, and I think is true in this work, is that what emanates from it, what vibrates from it, has energetic impact upon you that reinforces core beliefs, aspirations, emotional and spiritual chords. And when I see this work, I see that so evident. The closer you look at it, the video that was done of the opening last Friday night, the videographer, David Seedy, I want to compliment because he took the camera and really almost made love to the topographies of Bernie's surfaces. And I want you all to look at the surfaces and look at what is encrypted into each of these pieces, because they become a chronology or a reference point for the origins of a lot of things that have moved all of our lives and our hearts and our souls. In the context of this musical archaeology, cultural artifacts, the American flag is the glue that binds all of the elements of his work together. That's sort of evident to anyone who looks at it. And when you come in here and look at it, I will say each morning when my staff and I come in, it's hard not to feel this deep chord of pride and emotional devotion to who and what our country is and what it represents. And I want you to talk about the American flag. I've had so many questions about that.
Yeah, well, I could talk for hours on that, but
Do
I'll try and be a little brief. Yes, obviously that's a point of reference that everybody sort of zeroes in on. And for me, okay, number one, the music and the flag and the country they all go hand in hand. But yeah, for me, the flag is something that binds all these pieces together. It's become sort of my, I guess, the image that I have sort of gone back to the most. And simply that's because it is so iconic. And I've said this so many times about the American flag. There is no one symbol, I think, in the world that is more potent and referred to in generationally than the American flag. I mean, if you go around the world to any country, you will not see that nation's flag flown, shown, or exposed anywhere near the way that the American flag is flown. Is it patriotism? I don't know, but I think it's ingrained into the American nature. And that is the thing that just inspires me the most. Again, you know, I've portrayed it in all of my work because it's such an malleable symbol. It's a wonderful symbol. It has had such an extraordinary history. And that is where the crux of the matter lies, because, you know, there's a certain segment that you're never going to change their opinion of how the flag should be treated, how it should be respected. I'm sure there are, even though, you know, I can pose arguments, I'm sure there are a lot of people that don't appreciate what I do with the flag. But at the same time, if you knew how many people, families of servicemen who have passed away, servicemen who have died in battle, families of servicemen that have donated flags to me because they have seen my work and understand it and appreciate it, I'm going to go with that element rather than the ones that have a more, I don't want to say redneck attitude about it. That's the wrong terminology. But you just have to remember what the flag has been through. And when you see it in all of these pieces, the flag has been there. It's been underground. It's been dug up. It's been blooded, battered. But it's resilient. It's always come back. And that is the main ingredient of my work, is to show how resilient the flag is. I mean, the flag is thank you. I mean, I've said this many times, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but yes, the flag has been tucked under the floorboards of prison camps. It's been dragged out of the rubble of 9/11. You know it. It's been on battlefields. It's been shot through, but it always returns. And that is what I'm trying to emphasize in my work. And the interesting thing is that I think a lot of people don't realize that the respectful way to dispose of a flag is to burn it. And that's what I'm doing.
That was a beautiful insight. One of the things that occurs to me, and we've talked about this in the gallery, and I hope you all will all consider it when you're looking at Bernie's work, what he relayed about his respect for indigenous music forms. If you think about it, all the great forms of music that characterize popular culture have their roots in the American South, the Deep South. The flag is emblematic of a consciousness, a point of view that actually allowed those forms of music to gestate, to express themselves, because a lot of that music came from elements of the culture that would not have been permitted as readily in other countries and in other paradigms. So it's the philosophical architecture of American culture, and the flag is emblematic of that. Dana told me, he said, Bill, when you get right down to it, Bernie's just straight up cowboy. He's just a cowboy. And I want you to talk about that because there is an element of the West and the sparseness, the lack of the bare boneness of the aesthetic that is really present in your work that has a relationship to the South.
My generation, the post-war generation, post-war World War II generation in England, we lived in an era of black and white. And it was American music that put the color back into post-war England. Whether it was, England, let's face it, to give it credit, did more for American music to bounce it back from Europe to the United States. I mean, look what the Beatles, the Stones, all of the British rock bands of the 60s, all fed off of American roots music, blues music, Southern music, especially Southern music. So you have to look at that element of it. That was the magnet that brought us all here. But I had a bigger magnet that made me stay, because I had an inborn passion to be an American. I'm not saying was I born in the wrong place at the wrong time, possibly. Well, if I was born in the wrong place at the wrong time, I wouldn't be here now, probably. So that would kind of mess things up a little. But but having said that, I really outside of music, I had a historical love for this country. Just the opening of the West, when everybody in school wanted to learn about Henry VIII and Henry V and the Battle of Hastings, I was much more interested in the Battle of Bull Run and Chattanooga and Shiloh, and I wanted to know about that stuff. That was the stuff that excited me. I wasn't interested in musty old kings and castles and crap like that. It was all about, it was a mixture of truth and fantasy. Along with the history, I loved John Ford and Sam Peckinpah. They were the guys that really, as I said before, lit the blue touch paper, and that's what I wanted to be. And I lived I had a ranch up where I live now. I've moved from there since because I'm a little older now and I can't do the things I used to do. So I live vicariously through my daughter, who's a champion barrel racer, you know. So I'm thoroughly proud of her. But for 10 years, I rodeoed. I mean, I was full-on cowboy.
Because I think almost without exclusion, everybody in this room has the capacity to collect art. And when one collects art, it is my view, most of you who know me know this is an unambiguous point of view. I believe that works of art, in a metaphysical sense, are delivery systems. In their most potent form, they are delivery systems for consciousness. They are encrypted or encoded with information that came through an artist like Bernie, and it's expressed in his choice of twine and aged guitars and the bruising and battering of certain elements and the resuscitation of them. So if you acquire works of art like that, that energy emanates into your home, and it reinforces, it expands, and enhances who you are. And we had this discussion at dinner last night with two really wonderful clients here about the acquisition of art and why we do it and what we're looking for. When I look at your work, Bernie, I just want to energetically drink the energy that's flowing from it. And I think that it affects us at an auditory level in a strange way, not entirely because of your lyrics with your association with Elton, but your reverence for so many of these other musicians is also vibrating out. And it's a very rich and soulful experience. I love the Americana-esqueness of it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think it's important to understand, and I like what you said then, because it makes tremendous sense. There is a lot of energy that goes into the creation of these pieces. It's very visceral, it's very organic. I work in an old paint warehouse just around the corner from the house that I live in California, and it's big. I mean, I refer to it as a chop shop rather than a sort of studio, because that's kind of what it looks like. I always say that I acquire more materials at the hardware store than I do at the art store. In fact, I rarely go to the art store. It's the hardware store is my home. Power tools are my friends. But yeah, found materials are one of the greatest components, I think, an artist of my sort of, for my tastes, is. I mean, I take new instruments, I destroy them, I make them old, and I bring them back to life again, hopefully. But what I do, as I say, in my studio is such a different way of working than in any other artistic form that I used to create. I mean, when I work in my other day job, you know, the other one, writing songs there, that's very solitary. It's very silent. It's very quiet. I have to be on my own. I don't necessarily have to be on my own to create. If people are around, that's fine. When I'm working in my studio, because it's loud, it's noisy, it's messy. If I don't go home every night with dirt under my nails, then I didn't do a good job. But I love being in my studio. It's interesting. I've been running around the world now for the best part of this year for different situations, different projects, and it's not wholly comfortable for me. I'm a homebody. I like being home with my family, and I like more than anything to be in my studio creating. It's funny, I left 2 half-finished pieces when I came out for this trip a couple of weeks ago. I've been in so many different places. I wake up not quite sure where I am each day right now, but I left 2 incomplete pieces, and it's like I feel I've left my children undressed. You know, I need to get back there to finish it. And as much as I love being here and talking to you all, I just want to go home and get back to work.
I so relate to that. That's
I'm curious about where you acquired the instruments. I would think you are too kind a person to smash guitars.
Well, Pete Townsend did it pretty good, but no, to be totally honest, that's what Amazon's for.
Smashing guitars?
You can get guitars pretty cheap these days, so I just happen to make them a lot cheaper.
Ah.
No, seriously, I mean, everything I get, I buy bulk, so, I would never, ever consider, taking beautiful old vintage guitars and doing what I do to them. No, as I say, I try and I'm as varied as possible in what I acquire. A lot of them are donated, but basically everything you see is when I get it is brand new.
Really?
Oh yeah, and because that's half of the fun of it for me, just if you see in my studio, you'll see there's like strings of guitars all along on hooks, and they're brand new, and then the next thing you see is they're looking like this.
Okay, you get your violins.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Well, don't you think? Wouldn't you
Yeah,
like to
well,
do that?
Hey, if Jimi Hendrix can light his guitar
Yeah,
on
exactly.
fire,
Yeah.
go for it. It ends up as beautiful visual art.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lois. I'm going to turn this over to you as our guest. If anybody has any questions that they would like to ask Bernie, there is a Sound John. There is a microphone that can be brought to your table so that we can hear you. Okay, Donovan has the microphone. All right, Terry Weiss.
Yeah. You mentioned influences by Hans Hofmann and Kiefer, but you didn't mention Rauschenberg of his combines in the 50s and 60s, and his good friend Jasper Johns, of course, who did the flags at
Sure.
the same time frame. And it seems what they were doing was really questioning what is art, and what you've done is kind of started with some of those principles and really taken it into a different direction.
Well, absolutely. You can't mention everybody, but unfortunately, I didn't mention Rauschenberg, who possibly, I think, more so than the Hoffman and Kiefer, was certainly 100% a huge influence on me. In fact, you'll see a couple of pieces here today. In fact, I see one right over there that is very much influenced by Rauschenberg. And I agree with what you're saying. So I'm trying to influence people, hopefully, and I mean, not to even compare myself with people like that, because that would be just unspeakable. But hopefully I'm speaking in a different way, and I'm speaking for different art forms. I'm trying to, as I've said constantly today, I'm trying to resurrect musical genres that hopefully will not be forgotten and never be forgotten. But if you think about the way social media works today and how everything that's new today is old tomorrow, I'm just terrified that ultimately, in the same way as I think history is being forgotten, kids today barely know about World War II, never mind World War I. It can become a little terrifying. So I'm hopefully in my own way just doing my part. You can only take a small framework and work with it. If you get too general, then it gets too distilled, and it's too hard to do. So I'm just trying to do my part with these pieces to keep a certain part of our culture alive.
Next question. Okay, Dolores.
I think I can hear. I don't know if I need you need a mic.
You were speaking about literary influences, when you left England and came to America. Had you read Kerouac's book, On the Road?
Did I read Kerouac's On the Road?
Was that an influence?
Do you know what? No, it really wasn't. I didn't care for it terribly. There is so much. I was more of a Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain kind of guy.
Okay.
He was my On the Road. We all have varied tastes. I'm much more, I think, folksy is the right word. I adored Mark Twain.
Yeah.
I didn't like things like Catcher in the Rye. I thought Holden Caulfield was an asshole, you know. But then again, Atticus Finch was a hero,
Yeah.
you know. So the whole rebellious youth thing is a very strange dichotomy to toss around, you know. And it's all a matter of taste. But they were all inspirational, certainly. I think Mark Twain was a huge influence on me. My mother, going back to my mother, who I said was a very sort of, had a bohemian sensibility about her, had loved narrative poetry. And so there's actually one, I don't know if the piece is here, but I loved, there was a piece called The Ballad of William Sycamore, which is probably one of the great, great American narrative poems. And that again, was a huge influence on me. It was a history lesson in sort of 12 pages. And so, yeah.
And what about Walt Whitman?
When I first looked at your work the other night, I noticed that there were sort of three themes that kept repeating themselves, and you've spoken to two of them, the guitars and the American flag. But as an avid comic book collector, I'd be curious to hear you talk a little bit about your interest in comic books and why you thought it was a good fit for your work.
That's a good question. The interesting thing is that I was never a huge comic book fan. I never bought comic books. I wasn't interested in reading them. I'm not one of those guys that goes and watches Marvel movies. I have no interest in that whatsoever. But I do love the artwork. It's very sort of, it's a little Warhol-esque, I suppose, you know. It's my homage to that kind of 50s and 60s pop art. I buy comic books by the bulk, and I just find that the best parts of them that I like, and I just think they're so colorful and over the top and crazy, but it's funny because I say the juxtaposition is that I didn't really like when I grew up, I never bought comic books. I wasn't interested in them remotely. I just liked the fiercely crazy sort of artwork that they project. I mean, it's so over the top that you can't sort of resist it, basically.
I mean, obviously the art, I have two questions actually. The art is not for every place. It's a particular type of art. So when you design a piece, you know, like this one I'm looking at, it says trash, 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 trash. It's not gonna go in my bedroom.
No.
So are you imagining?
Why not?
Yeah.
Depends what your bedroom looks like.
Exactly, exactly. So when you design a piece, are you imagining a place that is going to be or a particular?
No,
vibe?
absolutely not. No, I mean I don't design my artwork for any given home. I just hope it finds the right home. Yes, obviously, without a doubt, you know, it's not going. My artwork is going to look best in a certain environment. You know, will it look good in a funky loft in Greenwich Village? Yeah, it'll look great there. But then again, it might look equally at home in some very contemporary place because it would be a juxtaposition of the cleanliness, the clean kind of surroundings. So, but at the same by the same token, I don't create my work for any particular environment. I create my work for myself and then hope that it finds the right home and somebody that will appreciate it. What I'd like to think is that the ghosts of the people that I create the work about will take their voices to whoever takes them home.
I was in the UK in the late 50s and 60s, and like you, privileged to be American. And so enjoy the work on the walls here in this gallery, and thank you, Bill. This is just amazing. But I'm interested in, I'm looking at your work, and I understand, obviously, the world understands, that you take these beautiful words and you compose, and you construct songs. And now you have found this path in life where you are constructing amazing pieces of work, and you're teaching the world in a different way than you did with your songs. But earlier, I was in the back enjoying taking everything in because I had the best view. I got to see all the art, and I got to see you and Bill. But there's a piece in the back that's got me a little confused. It's deconstructed, and I've known you as someone that constructs songs. I now understand that you construct art in a beautiful manner. You found a way not to kill the American flag, not to burn it, but to bring it to life. But what is it about your work that shows deconstruction, and what does that mean to you?
Well, I think deconstruction, it's sort of working backwards and working forwards. I mean, deconstruction, again, is a way of reinventing things. I think you have to sometimes take things apart in order to understand them. It's like, how do we know how a watch works or a plane flies? You got to kind of take it apart. I mean, I still don't know how a plane gets off the ground. And I don't know how a watch works, and I can't fix the plumbing on a sink, but somebody does. And this is probably a convoluted way of answering your question. But yeah, sometimes, for me, taking things apart is the only way to understand how to put them back together. And until we do that in all walks of life, until we try and understand how things work and people work, we're not going to get any satisfaction or any peace. We have to take things apart to understand how they work and how they tick. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.